We are now in part 5 of chapter 6, Attitude Influence in the Manipulated Mind by Denise Wynn. If a child dies in a fire when there is only one adult with the child in the house, then the adult alone can be blamed for not saving the child. If, however, there are others present, responsibility doesn't fall clearly to one person, and, as a consequence, none may take it. Each reinforces the other's inertia. Not acting actually becomes a socially acceptable thing to do. The need to conform in a variety of social situations, even if there are adverse implications for others outside it, is a strong one. Even if attitudes or beliefs remain unaltered, actions don't. But in many cases where actions are in line with conformity, attitudes may as a result come to change too. More will be said of that in the next 2 sections. Commitment. How does a person's behavior affect not only his attitudes but also the very stuff from which attitudes are formed? In The Psychology of Commitment, Professor Charles Kiesler sets himself to find out by describing his own and others' experiments, which seem to provide some conclusive material to work from. Friedman and Fraser found that if an individual wants someone to do him a big favor, the most successful technique for winning it is to induce him to do a small favor first. In their experiments, housewives were to be asked to place a large eyesore of a sign on their front lawns urging passers-by to keep California beautiful. But first, half of the chosen housewives were asked to put a small, unobtrusive sign in their windows. Those that had agreed to that request were far more likely to agree to stand the large sign in their garden, even if the 2 requests were made by apparently 2 totally unconnected people, or even if the signs were about different issues, than those housewives who were approached with the large sign just out of the blue. The researchers concluded that the carrying out of the small favor led the housewives to see themselves in a new light, as doers. Therefore, the larger request was seen more favorably by them because they were already established in an active role. Quite clearly, the actions affected attitude. In his own work, Kiesler discovered the power of what he termed the boomerang effect. If a person has committed himself to something and is then attacked for his position, he increases his commitment, even if it was not at all strong in the first place. To test his theory, he asked if a group of liberal-minded women to give out leaflets in favor of birth control to children at local schools. The next day, half of the leaflet distributor group received a leaflet themselves through the post, only this leaflet virulently attacked the giving of birth control information in schools. Afterwards, all the women who had been involved in the original distribution, plus others in the neighborhood, were also equally liberal-minded about contraception, received a visit from a person, supposedly from the birth control campaign, asking them if they would be willing to give more active help in any of several ways. The women who had given out the leaflets and then had received a communication through the post attacking their position were far more willing to join up with the campaign than those who were simply given out leaflets or those who had done nothing at all. Kiesler said, in general conclusion, the boomerang effect leads one to interesting possibilities and might be related to the question of how people become more extreme in their attitudes. A committed subject might become more extreme under attack in an attempt to justify his past behavior, since the alternative of abandoning his opinion to agree with the counter communication is relatively closed. Since the process of self-justification may not be simple, the person might seek out others who are even more extreme as social support for his previous behavior, perhaps even seeking other behaviors to perform that would justify his own. If so, one might turn a moderate into an extremist in a simple but non-obvious manner. First, induce him to perform some behavior consistent with his beliefs and get him committed to it. Next, attack the attitude in question. We suggest that the person may be more amenable to requests for other extreme behavior, more willing to interact with others holding an extreme opinion on the issue, and end up by becoming more extreme himself. Of course, The effect should depend on a particular combination of degree of commitment and strength of attack. That is, the degree of commitment should be high enough so that the subject can't really change his position, and the attack should be strong enough to arouse the person's defenses, but not so strong that he is forced to abandon his position. It is interesting that Hans Tak, in The Social Psychology of Social Movements, succinctly makes a very similar observation. Most of us underestimate the extent to which extreme personalities can be the products of personal commitment. Clearly, we may have to alter a treasured concept of what commitment is. More usually, people tend to see commitment as something very personal, emanating from within. Psychological research would show that it can actually be engendered and maneuvered from without. In a study of the effect of forewarning on commitment, Kiesler gave a group of students an article to read, a topic about which the students' opinions were known. Some of the students received a version of the article which had a footnote on page 1, drawing their attention to the fact that the content was designed to change their current opinion. Others had the footnote at the end of the article. The remainder had no footnote on their article at all. Afterwards, all these students, plus some others who had not even read the article, discussed their views on the topic concerned. Those who had been forewarned by reading the footnote before they read the article and therefore knew their views were under attack were the strongest in holding to their own original opinion. So says Kiesler, forewarning of attack may strengthen commitment if the commitment is firm enough. This finding, borne out by many other independent researchers, may perhaps be seen in the case of religious cult converts who are constantly warned of the dangers of being caught by a deprogrammer who will try to overturn their belief, thus strengthening the convert's resolve to hold firm to their faith in the face of any evil. Kiesler makes two other points worthy of mention here. He found in an experiment carried out with researchers, Zana and DeSalvo, that if people committed themselves to attain a certain number of sessions of a group and then discovered that their own views were rather at variance with those of the group, gradually their own views would grow closer to the group norm. The reason here being not that the individual concerned was frightened of seeming out of things, but that because he had committed himself to spending time with the group, he had to justify that decision. More will be said of this in the next section. Kiesler actually makes the comparison between this effect and the friendship that often grew up between POWs in Korea and their warders. It was, after all, the warders that the prisoners were committed to relate to for the immediate or even longer-term future, whereas other prisoners could disappear tomorrow. And I'll stop it right there so we don't run out of time. And we'll pick up with part 6 of chapter 6 in the next video. And we are in The Manipulated Mind by Denise Wing. See you there.